Thank you, whoever that was. Hey, come on down this way. I want to thank you all for coming here. I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute, and first of all, I want to thank you for making time, and I'm glad that none of you actually read the newspaper to find out that they scheduled a Bronco game on the same night we did that, but that was afterwards. I also want to thank Bill Daniels for becoming wealthy, famous, and letting us use his house tonight. I love the vibe here. It's got that certain late 1970s kind of vibe going here, so I'm thrilled we all can be here. Hey, can I take a second and just say why we get together on nights like tonight? Usually this time of year we do our Founders Night Dinner, our large, wonderful gala event. And we've decided to try something a little different, and I thought we'd give it a try, which was we're moving that event to February so that people don't have as much fatigue after the election and other pre-Christmas stress. But we also thought this would be an opportunity to take this little award that we do and bring it to its own little cocktail party, and that's why we wanted to do it. I first want to say that I'm a very, very fortunate individual in that, probably 2 decades ago, maybe even longer, I ran into a man up in Boulder named Vern Bickel. Vern Bickel was an entrepreneur who lived the American dream, but he also did something that so few of us do. He really recognized that in order to fight for freedom, you need to invest in the future and invest in people. And Vern Bickel turned out to be this Johnny Appleseed of different organizations, different activists. He really took the idea of citizen activism and pushed it. I know there are a lot of people who believe in great institutions. Vern Bickel was my mentor, and he believed in people, in the power of doing that. And without Vern Bickel, I certainly wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. The Independence Institute would not exist, and great bits of legislation like TABOR would not be around. And I'm so thrilled that Lillian Bickel, his widow, is here. I saw Lillian, I'm not too sure where she is right here, but if we can say hello to Lillian. Lillian, thank you for coming out here. And a great activist in his own right, Brent Bickel, his son is here tonight too, who's getting, taking what his father has done and moving it to the next step. So Brent, thank you for being here tonight. I greatly appreciate it. The idea of this little recognition is that people who do the fight for freedom day in and day out don't get noticed. It's a tough job. They do it because they believe in the outcome, not because they're looking for a paycheck, not because they're looking to get recognition, but they believe in liberty. And we realized we needed to honor these folks. And so I can't believe it's been 12 years now since we honored first Larry Latito, who was a great activist in Jefferson County, Dennis Polhill, who is the father of term limits, who's here tonight, Doug Bruce, who gave us TABOR and saved the state from financial ruin and becoming like California, Al Knight, who was a journalist who took on the bureaucracy in the Denver Post and got the truth out about so many issues. John Andrews, who beyond founding the Independence Institute went on to become Senate President and push so many great things, and he's here tonight. I'm thrilled. Barry Paulson, who is an economist at CU, who stood up to so much pressure at higher ed to tell the truth about free market economics. Pam Benignu, who I know is here, who's worked for Educational Choice for 20 some odd years. Peter Blake, who with the Rocky Mountain News was able to give us the detailed information of what's going on in our movement. Fred Holden, who's worked on so many issues. Natalie Meyer, a citizen activist who pried open the books of Jefferson County and Jefferson County School District. Michelle Moran over here, who's been so active in Colorado Springs to bring the truth out. And this year, we realized we needed to honor someone who for decades have been doing what many of us do so poorly, and that is communicating the ideas of conservatism and free markets without the words, but by stories and illustrations. And you see on the screen here and over here in this cabinet some of the great one-panel cartoons from Chuck Asay, who has been working for the Colorado Springs Gazette and a nationally syndicated cartoonist for the last 83 years. And I want to thank him for all he's done. And you may or may not know that I'm a recovering cartoonist myself. I actually tried to start a comic strip back in college, a conservative version of Doonesbury or Bloom County, which actually got some traction, but ultimately failed, not for any real fault of mine, but simply because I didn't know how to draw, didn't know how to spell, and I wasn't particularly funny. Other than that, it was a great comic strip. And at the Independence Institute, we realized our job is to sell the ideas of liberty, to sell the ideas of free markets. And it's difficult to do that just with issue papers, just with policy briefs. The days of being able to put out a white paper and expect change are long over. We have to find people and meet them where they're willing to be convinced. Now on the editorial page, comic strips and cartoons do that. And to kick us off tonight, I want to introduce one of the great cartoonists nationally. You've seen his work everywhere. Henry Payne from the Detroit News, who I don't know how you survive in Detroit and have stayed alive, but for so many years you've seen his work. And also he's done something pretty remarkable in that the Detroit News, owned by our very own Dean Singleton, has put forward an online edition called The Michigan View, which is conservative commentary. We're finding new ways to reach our audience. And I thought it'd be great to bring Henry Payne out here so he can honor one of his own, because other than that once a year convention they have in Motel 6 in Omaha, cartoonists never really get to meet. And so I thought it would be terrific for Henry to come out and introduce our award recipient. Henry.
Thanks, John, and thanks for all of you coming out here tonight. And this is it's a wonderful time to be a conservative with think tanks all over this country. And John and we have one of the best in Michigan at the Mackinac Center. It's hard to believe that Michigan existed without the Mackinac Center for the 25 years before it came about. And John is a tremendous force, as is his staff out here in Colorado, and all of you who support their efforts. I mean, it's a great time to be a think tank. It's a great time to be a conservative. And we are all fortunate tonight to be here to honor Chuck Asay, who's one of the great cartoon talents in this great country for the last few decades. This weekend, I made this trip out here. This is actually the first time I have met Chuck, even though I've been a fan of his for many years. It made me think of what it is that folks expect when we meet a cartoonist.
Because everybody wonders that.
Because there are so few of us. We are indeed rare birds. When I got into this business 25 years ago, there were 300 staff cartoonists in the United States. Today there are 60. We should be on the endangered species list. We should be the subject of a Discovery Channel documentary. In my own state of Michigan, there are only two. There's myself and my competitor, Detroit Free Press cartoonist Mike Thompson. When I was growing up in West Virginia, I didn't know any cartoonists. I was a black sheep in a family of engineers. The first cartoonist I got to know was a gag cartoonist named Henry Martin, up in Princeton, New Jersey, where I went to college. And Henry was a gag cartoonist for the New Yorker magazine. And there are even fewer gag cartoonists in this country than there are editorial cartoonists. My second job in this business came with Scripps Howard Newspapers in 1985, where I worked out of the Scripps National Bureau in Washington, D.C. And we would occasionally entertain Scripps corporate execs who would come through the Capitol for various reasons. And at one dinner, I remember one executive turning to me and saying, "Henry, make me laugh. But we are not stand-up comedians." Caldara might be, but he's no longer a cartoonist. What we are journalists. It's just that we use different tools. In fact, I think great cartoonists like Chuck are rare because they are able to meld knowledge of current events, news instinct, writing skill, drawing ability, and a sense of humor into one product and make it work. That's a complicated souffle that would challenge any great chef. Guys like Chuck can make a picture speak 1,000 words. They can capture a moment like no other journalistic medium. But ultimately, I think what editorial cartoonists are is a symbol of a healthy democracy. They are a symbol of American liberty. Think of it every day. Guys like Chuck and I wake up and we throw stones at the most powerful politicians on earth, and we get away with it. I once drew President George W. Bush in a skirt as a cheerleader. I drew Senator Ted Kennedy as a toad. Chuck, I saw one of Chuck's cartoons today, drew Governor Guy Romer kissing 2 women on both sides of his mouth. But that freedom is hardly universal. A few years ago, a Palestinian cartoonist started poking fun at POL chief Yasser Arafat. A price was put on his head, and he was forced to flee into hiding in London. He continued his satire there and was ultimately hunted down and killed by PLO thugs. Or consider the fate of a handful of Norwegian cartoonists who a few years ago had the audacity to caricature the Prophet Muhammad. Today they are all in hiding, living in fear of an Islamic extremist fatwa. To understand what is at stake in East versus West and the global